The officer's hands were shaking as he stared at the evidence. A black purse clutched in the hands of a white teenage boy who had been caught just minutes after the arrest. A crowd of angry bystanders murmured their disgust as 9-year-old Tiana Daniels stood trembling in her mother's hand. Arms, her small wrists, still red from the handcuffs she'd worn moments before. Officer Darren Scott had claimed she fit the description, but his hasty judgment was now on full display. Alicia Daniels, Tiana's mother, leveled a glare at the officer that could cut through steel. "This is what you call justice." She demanded, her voice steady, yet laced with fury. The world was about to hear her. What started as a wrongful arrest turned into a national fight for justice. Alicia and Tiana's story sparked a movement changing their community forever. Do you believe in the power of courage to transform pain into progress? Share your thoughts below. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the heart of Willow Creek Park. Laughter echoed across the playground as children chased one another, their carefree voices harmonizing with the rustle of leaves. In the gentle breeze among them was Tiana Daniels, a 9-year-old girl with a vibrant smile and a radiant energy that seemed to draw people to her, clad in a pink hoodie and her favorite sneakers. She was engrossed in a game of hopscotch, her braids bouncing with each joyful leap. The chalk squares she and her friends had drawn on the pavement were now faint from hours of play. Unbeknownst to Tiana, trouble was brewing nearby. A woman's piercing cry for help rang out across the park. "Someone stole my purse," she shouted, pointing vaguely toward the group of children within minutes. A police cruiser pulled up and out stepped Officer Darren Scott, his brow furrowed, and his hand already resting on his holster. Tiana barely noticed the commotion until Officer Scott stormed over to her, his shadow looming large over her petite frame. "Hey, you!" He barked, his tone sharp and accusing. Tiana froze, her wide brown eyes filled with confusion. "You match the description? Where's the purse?" "The purse," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what you mean. I didn't take anything," but Officer Scott wasn't listening. His gaze swept over her small backpack, as though it might hold the evidence. He was so sure he would find the other children confused and frightened, stepped back, a few murmured in protest. She didn't do anything, but their voices were drowned out by the officer's commands, ignoring their pitch. "Please," Scott pulled out, his handcuffs turned around. He ordered. Tiana's small frame began to shake as tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong by now." A crowd had begun to gather, murmur of disbelief spreading among the onlookers. Some pulled out their phones to record the unfolding scene. A woman in yoga gear approached hesitantly, her voice tentative. "Officer, maybe you've made a mistake. She's just a child." Scott waved her off dismissively, securing the cuffs around Tiana's wrists. The metal clinked loudly, a cruel sound that seemed to pierce the hearts of everyone watching. "Step back, ma'am." "Let me do my job," as Tiana was led toward the patrol car. Her tears streamed freely down her cheeks. A voice broke through the growing crowd, sharp and commanding. "What are you doing to my daughter?" It was Alicia Daniels, Tiana's mother, rushing across the lawn, her nurse's scrub still wrinkled from a long shift. Her heart raced as she took in the sight of her little girl in handcuffs. "Let her go," Alicia demanded, standing firmly in front of the officer. "What evidence do you have to treat my child this way?" Officer Scott glanced at Alicia, his expression indifferent. "We got a report of a stolen purse, and she fits the description," he said curtly. "I'm just doing my job. She's 9 years old." Alicia shot back, her voice cracking with a mix of anger and anguish. Just then, a murmur rippled through the crowd as another officer approached, holding a teenage boy by the arm. In his other hand was a woman's purse. The real thief had been caught only 10 minutes after Tiana's arrest. The crowd erupted in gasps and angry whispers, their phones capturing every moment of this damning turn of events. The crowd's anger grew as the truth unfolded. The teenager's guilty expression and the recovered purse left no room for doubt. Alicia's voice trembled with rage as she turned back to Officer Scott. "You arrested my daughter without evidence," she said, her words cutting through the murmurs. "You traumatized her for nothing, officer." Scott hesitated, his grip on Tiana's arm loosening. I was following procedure," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. Tiana's tear-streaked face and the judgmental stares of the crowd left him visibly flustered. Alicia knelt beside Tiana, gently wiping her tears. It's okay. Baby mommy's here, she said softly, though her own heart was breaking. She stood and faced Scott, her posture defiant. This isn't just a mistake. This is negligence. This is racial profiling. My child deserves better than this, Mom. Scott started, but Alicia cut him off. You explain yourself to the right people. She snapped, her voice steady, despite the fury in her eyes. This isn't over. By now, several people had gathered close their phones, recording every detail. Let her go. Someone shouted while others murmured words of solidarity with Alicia. This happens too often, one woman said, shaking her head. It's always our kids. A supervisor arrived moments later, alerted by the escale and scene. The officer, an older black man named Sergeant Davis, immediately assessed the situation. His expression darkened when he saw Tiana still in cuffs, her small wrists red from the metal. What's going on here, Scott? He asked sharply. She matched the description. Scott stammered. I thought Sergeant Davis raised a hand to silence him. You thought wrong. He said, his voice cold. He turned to Alicia, Mom. I deeply apologize for what's happened here. We'll make this right. Apologies don't erase the damage. Alicia replied, holding Tiana protectively. Check, just a child, Sergeant. Sergeant. Davis nodded solemnly. You're absolutely right. Please let me handle this with that. He gestured for another officer to remove the handcuffs. Tiana winced slightly as they were released, and Alicia immediately wrapped her arms around her. The sight of a mother comforting her child brought an uneasy hush over the crowd, as Sergeant Davis led Scott away for questioning. Alicia gathered her courage. She looked out at the faces surrounding her, some filled with sympathy, others with outrage. This is what our kids face every day, she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. If we don't hold them accountable, who will? The murmurs grew louder. A wave of agreement rippling through the gathering. Several people nodded, and others exchanged determined glances. What had started as a routine day at the park had transformed into a moment of reckoning. Alicia took Tiana's hand, guiding her toward their car, as the crowd slowly began to disperse. But this was far from over. She could feel it change. Af wouldn't come unless someone stood up and demanded it. And if no one else would, Alicia knew she had to be that someone. As Alicia drove home, her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension in the passenger seat. Tiana sat quietly, staring out of the window, her usual bright demeanor replaced by a somber silence. Alicia glanced over at her daughter, her heart aching. The sight of her little girl in handcuffs replayed in her mind like a broken record, fueling a mix of anger and determination. Tiana, baby Alicia began, keeping her voice gentle. How are you feeling, Tiana? Hesitated, her small fingers fiddling with the hem of her hoodie. I don't know, Mama, she finally whispered. Why did that man think I was bad? I didn't do anything wrong. Alicia's throat tightened. She pulled into their driveway and turned to Tiana, placing a hand on her shoulder. Listen to me, sweetheart, she said firmly. You did nothing wrong. That officer was wrong, and what happened today isn't your fault. Do you understand? Tiana nodded slowly, though the confusion and hurt in her eyes lingered. Alicia kissed, her forehead. Go inside and rest. I'll be in soon. Once Tiana disappeared into the house, Alicia leaned back in the driver's seat, letting out a shaky breath. Her anger hadn't subsided. It had only grown stronger. She pulled out her phone, opened social media, and began scrolling through the dozens of videos already circulating. Each clip showed the same thing: a scared little girl being wrongfully detained, and a crowd of bystanders demanding justice. One video in particular had gone viral, garnering thousands of views and comments within hours. Alicia read through the responses, a mix of outrage, sympathy, and calls for action. This is unacceptable. That officer should be fired. Racial profiling is ruining lives. When will this stop? Protect. Our kids hold these people accountable. Alicia's resolve solidified. This wasn't just about Tiana anymore. It was about every child who had been unfairly targeted, every family that had endured the same pain. She opened her email app and began drafting a letter to the local police department, detailing the events of the day and demanding answers. But even as she typed, she knew that wouldn't be enough. This required something bigger. The next morning, Alicia stood in her living room, her laptop open on the coffee table and her phone buzzing with constant notifications. The viral video had gained traction overnight, and reporters from local news stations were reaching out for interviews. She scrolled through the messages, her eyes, pausing on one from a well-known civil rights organization offering their support. "Mom, are you?" "Okay," Tiana asked softly, peeking around the corner. Alicia smiled, though her exhaustion was evident. "I'm okay, baby. I'm just trying to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." Tiana nodded, her face still clouded with unease. "Do I have to talk to the reporters only if you want to?" Alicia reassured her, "but no one's going to force. You're the most important part of this, and I'll protect you no matter what." Tiana hesitated, then stepped closer. "I want people to know," she said quietly. Maybe it'll help. Alicia's chest swelled with pride. She pulled her daughter into a hug. "You're so brave," she whispered. "We'll do this together by midday." Alicia and Tiana were sitting in their living room facing a reporter from a local news station. The camera crew had set up lights and microphones, and the reporter, a young black woman named Simone, spoke to them with a warm, empathetic tone. Tiana Simone began gently. "Can you tell us what happened yesterday?" Tiana glanced at her mother, who gave her an encouraging nod, taking a deep breath. She recounted the events, playing hopscotch, the officer's sudden arrival, the accusations, and the handcuffs. Her voice trembled at times, but she pushed through, determined to make her experience. Heard Simone lean forward, her expression serious. "How did that make you feel?" "I felt small," Tiana admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, like I didn't matter, like he didn't see me as a person. Simone's eyes glistened with emotion. She turned to Alicia, "And you, Miss Daniels. How do you feel about what happened?" Alicia's voice was steady, though her anger was palpable as a mother. "It broke me to see my child treated that way, but as a black woman, I can't say. I'm surprised this isn't the first time something like this has happened. It's just the first time. It's happened to my baby, and it's unacceptable." The news segment aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Messages of support poured in from across the city, and calls for justice grew louder. Community leaders reached out, offering to help organize a protest. Alicia found herself at the center of a growing movement, one she hadn't anticipated but was determined to lead. 2 days later, hundreds of people gathered outside the police station, holding signs that read, "Justice for Tiana and Stop Racial Profiling." Alicia stood at the front, microphone in hand, her voice amplified over the crowd. "We are here today because our children deserve better." She began, her words met with cheers of agreement. "Tiana's story is just one of many, but we will not stay silent. We will demand accountability. We will demand change." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices united in solidarity. Among them were local politicians, activists, and even some police officers who supported the call for reform. As Alicia stepped down from the makeshift stage, a man approached her. He introduced himself as a lawyer with a civil rights organization and offered to represent her family in filing a lawsuit against the police department. "It's not just about compensation," he said. "It's about setting a precedent. This can't keep happening." Alicia nodded. "Let'un do it." The lawsuit was filed within the week, and the media frenzy only intensified. Officer Scott was placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation, and the police department announced plans to implement mandatory bias training for its officers. But for Alicia, this was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, she worked tirelessly, meeting with community leaders, attending city council meetings, and speaking at schools about the importance of accountability and justice. Through it all, Tiana remained by her side. Her resilience inspired others to join the fight one evening as they prepared for bed. Tiana looked up at her mother, Mama. "Do you think this will really change things?" Alicia smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think it's a start," she said, "and sometimes that's all you need to change the world. A start." Tiana nodded, her eyes bright with hope. "Then I'm glad we did it." As they turned off the lights, Alicia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The road ahead would be long, but she knew they had already taken the first step towards something bigger than themselves. Alicia woke early the next morning, her mind racing as the events of the past few days replayed in vivid detail. Tiana's arrest had sparked something larger than either of them could have imagined. The protest outside the police station had drawn local and national attention, and Alicia was now fielding calls from activists, journalists, and legal experts offering support, as much as she welcomed the momentum. She also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her downstairs. She found Tiana at the breakfast table doodling on a piece of paper. The girl's bright smile had begun to return, though the lingering shadows in her eyes reminded Alicia of how fragile the healing process could be. "Good morning, sweetheart," Alicia said, placing a kiss on Tiana's head. "What are you working on?" Tiana held up her drawing. It was a simple sketch of a girl standing tall with her arms stretched, wide surrounded by smaller figures, holding signs that read, "Be kind" and "We matter." Alicia's throat tightened. "That's beautiful, baby. Is this about the protest?" Tiana nodded. "I was thinking. Maybe we could make more signs for the next time." Alicia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's a great idea, and there will be a next time." This is just the beginning. By midday, Alicia was on a conference call with several community leaders and legal advisors. They were strategizing the next steps in their fight for justice and reform. Among the group was Mara Lewis, a seasoned civil rights attorney who had spent decades challenging systemic racism in law enforcement. "We need to keep the momentum going." Mara said, her voice firm, yet encouraging the lawsuit is a powerful tool. But it's only one part of the puzzle. We need to push for policy changes that will prevent this from happening to anyone else. Alicia leaned forward, her laptop camera capturing the determination in her expression. "What kind of changes are we talking about, Bias?" "Training for all offices is a start," Marcia replied. "But we also need independent oversight too often. Departments police themselves, and that leads to cover-ups. Instead of accountability, we'll push for a civilian review board with real authority." Another voice chimed in, this one belonging to Marcus, a local activist. "And we need to address the cult of policing that starts with hiring more officers from the communities they serve. Representation matters." As the discussion continued, Alicia took meticulous notes, her resolve strengthening with each suggestion. She realized that this fight was about more than just Tiana. It was about creating a safer, fairer system for every child in their community. Later that afternoon, Alicia and Tiana were invited to speak at a town hall meeting organized by the mayor's office. The room was packed with residents, journalists, and public officials, all eager to hear what Alicia had to say as she took the stage. Tiana by her side, the crowd fell silent. "Good evening." Alicia began, her voice, steady, despite the nervous energy sing through her, "I'm here tonight. As a mother who watched her 99-year-old daughter be handcuffed, treated like a criminal for no reason other than the color of her skin." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Alicia paused, letting the weight of her words settle before continuing. "This isn't just about Tiana. This is about every Black child who has been profiled, every family that has been torn apart by unjust policing, and every community that has been silenced. We are here to say an enough is enough." The audience erupted in applause, their cheers, a testament to the growing movement. Tiana, holding tightly to her mother's hand, took a small step forward. "I just want to say," she began, her voice, soft but clear, "that I don't want anyone else to feel how I felt. No one should be scared of the people who were supposed to protect them." Tears welled in Alicia's eyes as the crowd gave Tiana a standing ovation. She squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling an overwhelming mix of pride and determination. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Alicia met with school boards, church groups, and local businesses, rallying support for their cause. She and Mara worked tirelessly to build their legal case, gathering testimonies from other families who had experienced similar injustices. Meanwhile, the police department faced mounting pressure. The videos of Tiana's arrest had become a national story, sparking debates about racial profiling and police accountability. Officer Scott remained on administrative leave, and internal investigators were struggling to defend his actions. Sergeant Davis, who had intervened at the scene, reached out to Alicia privately. "I just want you to know," he said during a quiet phone call, "that not all of us agree with what happened. Many of us are pushing for change from within, but it's a slow process." "Thank you for saying that," Alicia replied, her tone measured. "But words aren't enough anymore. We need action." "I understand," Davis said, "and I hope you'll keep pushing. You're making a difference." One evening, as Alicia was finalizing a presentation for an upcoming city council meeting, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert. The police department had announced a press conference for the following morning. Speculation ran wild, with many wondering if it would include a formal apology or an update on the investigation. The next day, Alicia and Tiana watched the press conference from their living room. The police chief, flanked by senior officers, addressed the cameras with a solemn expression. "We acknowledge that the arrest of Tiana Daniels was a mistake." He said, "We apologize to Tiana and her family for the trauma caused by this incident. We are committed to rebuilding trust with our community and ensuring that something like this never happens again." Alicia felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was tempered by skepticism. Words were easy, actions were harder. The chief continued announcing several immediate reforms: mandatory bias, training for all officers, a review of departmental policies on detaining minors, and the creation of a task force to address racial disparities in policing. It was a start, but Alicia knew the fight was far from over. She turned to Tiana, who was watching the screen intently. "What do you think, baby?" she asked. Tiana shrugged. "It's good. They said sorry, but I hope they mean it." Alicia nodded. "Me too." "Sweetheart, me too." In the weeks that followed, the lawsuit gained momentum, and Alicia's advocacy efforts began to show results. Local schools introduced new programs on diversity and inclusion, and community leaders organized workshops to bridge the gap between law enforcement and residents. Tiana, though still processing her ordeal, found her voice. As a young activist, she joined Alicia at events, sharing her story with a mix of courage and vulnerability that inspired everyone who heard her one evening as they prepared for bed. Tiana asked, "Do you think things will really get better?" Mama Alicia smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think they already are." She said, "And you're a big part of that." Tiana beamed, her face lighting up with a spark of hope that Alicia hadn't seen in weeks. It was a reminder that, even in darkest moments, there was always the possibility of light. The weeks rolled into months, and the ripple effects of Tiana's story continued to grow. Alicia found herself balancing her nursing shifts with a packed schedule of meetings, interviews, and community events. Tiana's brave why had ignited something powerful, and Alicia was determined to channel that momentum into lasting change. One morning, as Alicia was preparing breakfast, Tiana walked into the kitchen, her backpack slung over her shoulder. The light in her eyes was brighter. "Now, though, the scars of her ordeal hadn't entirely faded, Mom. Can I ask you something?" Tiana said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "Of course, baby." "What on your mind?" Alicia replied. Flipping pancakes onto a plate, Tiana hesitated, fiddling with the strap of her bag. "Do you think Officer Scott feels bad for what he did?" Alicia paused, the spatula hovering in midair. It was a question she had wrestled with herself. "I don't know," she admitted, sitting down beside Tiana. "I hope he does. I hope he realizes how wrong it was to judge you without knowing you." Tiana nodded thoughtfully. "I keep thinking, what? If I wasn't lucky, what? If people didn't see what happened, would he have just gotten away with it?" The weight of her words settled over Alicia. "That's why we're fighting, Tiana," she said gently, "so that no one else has to go through what you did. And so people like Officer Scott learn to see everyone as a person, not just a description." Tiana reached for her fork, a quiet determination on her face. "I want to help more," Alicia smiled. "You already are, sweetheart." Just by being you that afternoon, Alicia met with Marcia and Marcus at a local community center. The room buzzed with energy as volunteers prepared for an upcoming town hall meeting. Flyers were stacked neatly on tables, each one calling for the establishment of a civilian review board to oversee police misconduct. Cases Mara spread out a stack of documents on the table, her sharp eyes scanning each page. "We've got strong support for the review board." She said even some city council members are on board, but we need to keep the pressure up. Alicia leaned forward, her hands clasped. "What's the next step?" Marcus grinned. "A rally, a big one. We'll bring together everyone who's been affected by this issue. Families, activists, even law enforcement allies. We need to show the city that this isn't just about one case. It's about a broken system." Alicia nodded, feeling a familiar spark of determination. "Let's do it." The rally was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in the heart of downtown. As the day approached, Alicia threw herself into the prepare operations, coordinating with volunteers, securing permits, and working with local businesses to spread. The word Tiana too got involved, helping design posters with messages like Justice for All and Protect Our Kids. On the day of the rally, the city's main square was transformed into a sea of people holding signs and chanting slogans. The air was electric with a sense of unity and purpose. Alicia stood on a makeshift stage, her heart pounding as she looked out at the crowd. Tiana stood beside her, clutching one of their homemade signs. The sight of her daughter's courage filled Alicia with a renewed sense of purpose. Taking the microphone, she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice steady, despite the lump in her throat. "We are here because we believe in justice. We believe in accountability. And we believe in a future where our children can grow up without fear." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing off the surrounding buildings. Alicia continued, her words flowing with conviction. "This fight isn't just about one officer or one incident. It's about a system that allows these injustices to happen. Again and again, we are here to say no more." The crowd roared in agreement, their voices rising in unison. Tiana stepped forward, her small but determined voice cutting through the noise. "And we're not going to stop until things change," she said, earning another wave of cheers. The rally's success was undeniable, garnering widespread media coverage and sparking conversations across the city. Alicia's phone buzzed, constantly with messages of support, offers to collaborate, and invitations to speak at events. But amid the progress, there were also challenges. One evening, as Alicia sat reviewing a draft of the proposed Civilian Review Board policy, she received a call from Mara. "We need to talk," Mara said, her tone serious. "The police union is pushing back hard against the review board. They're claiming it undermines their authority." Alicia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "What do we do?" "We don't back down," Mara replied firmly, "but we need to be strategic. We'll organize meetings with key stakeholders, gather data to support our case, and keep rallying public support." Alicia nodded her determination, unwavering whatever it takes. The fight for the review board became a focal point of Alicia's advocacy, consuming her days and often her nights. But through it all, she made sure to carve out time for Tiana, knowing how important it was to nurture her daughter's sense of safety and hope. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a nature documentary, Tiana turned to her mother. "Do you think we'll win, Mama?" she asked, her voice tinged with both hope and uncertainty. Alicia wrapped an arm around her. "I think we already are," she said, "because every time we stand up for what's right, we're making the world a little better." Tiana smiled, her head resting on Alicia's shoulder in that moment. Alicia felt a sense of peace, knowing that, no matter how long or difficult the journey they were on, the right path. Weeks later, the city council voted on the proposal for the Civilian Review Board. The council chambers were packed with supporters and opponents alike, filling every seat. Alicia sat near the front, her hands gripping Tiana's as they waited for the decision. When the final vote was announced, 7 in favor, 2 against, the room erupted in applause. Tears streamed down Alicia's face as she turned to Tiana. "We did it, baby," she whispered. "We did it," Tiana beamed, her smile brighter than Alicia had seen in months. For the first time since that fateful day in the park, Alicia felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. The creation of the review board was a milestone, but Alicia knew their work was far from over. She continued to advocate for broader reforms, speaking at conferences, mentoring other families affected by injustice, and pushing for change at the state level. Through it all, Tiana remained at her side, growing into a confident young leader who inspired everyone. She met together. They became a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, change was always possible. The victory at the city council meeting energized Alicia and her supporters, but it also drew intense scrutiny and resistance from those opposed to change the police union. Ramped up its public relations campaign, claiming the newly established Civilian Review Board would hinder officer ability to do their jobs effectively. The media, sensing a larger story, amplified both sides of the debate for Alicia. This newfound attention was both an opportunity and a challenge. She had spent months channeling her anger into action, but now the stakes were higher. The review board's success or failure could determine whether her efforts would lead to lasting reform or fade into another footnote in the long fight for justice. One morning, Alicia received an invitation to appear on a nationally televised panel discussion about policing and racial bias. Though flattered, she hesitated. The thought of speaking on such a large platform filled her with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I think you should do it. Mara said during a phone call that evening, "You've been the voice of this movement from the start. This is your chance to bring the conversation to a national audience." Alicia Ed pacing her living room. "What if they twist my words? What if I say the wrong thing?" You won't, Mara reassured her. "You speak from the heart. Alicia, that's what makes people listen after a moment's thought." Alicia made up her mind. All right, let's do this. The studio lights were blindingly bright as Alicia took her seat on the panel beside her. Sat a police chief from another city, a criminal justice professor, and a retired officer who was now a vocal advocate for reform across from them. A prominent police union representative adjusted his tie. His expression unreadable, the moderator began with a pointed question. "Miss Daniels, your daughter's story has sparked a nationwide movement, but critics argue that efforts like the Civilian Review Board undermine law enforcement. How do you respond?" Leah took a deep breath. "I understand the concerns," she began. Her voice, steady, but accountability and effective policing are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they go hand in a system that holds officers accountable, builds trust, and trust is essential for effective law enforcement. Daughter deserved better. All our children deserve better, and I won't stop fighting until they get it. The union representative leaned forward, his tone sharp. "With all due respect, Miss Daniels, the actions of one officer don't reflect the entire police force. You're painting us all with the same brush." Alicia met his gaze, her expression calm but firm. "This isn't just about one officer." She said, "It's about a system that allowed his actions to go unchecked. If we ignore these issues, we're failing not just our communities, but the office who want to do their jobs with integrity." The debate continued, with each panelist offering their perspective. By the end, Alicia felt a mix of exhaustion and pride. She had held her own, speaking her truth with clarity and conviction. As the cameras turned off, the retired officer leaned over to her. "You did good," he said with a small smile. "Don't let them intimidate you." The panel discussion aired later that week, drawing widespread attention. Social media buzzed with reactions, many praising Alia's poise and passion, but not all the responses were positive. The union's supporters criticized her, accusing her of vilifying police officers. Some comments were harsh, even cruel, but Alicia refused to be discouraged. Instead, she focused on her next steps. The Civilian Review Board had been established, but its power was limited. Alicia and her allies wanted to ensure it had the authority to investigate complaints independently and recommend disciplinary actions to do that. They needed broader public support and more funding. As summer approached, Alicia organized a series of town halls in neighborhoods across the city. She and her team wanted to educate residents about the review board and encourage them to share their experiences with law enforcement. Tiana often accompanied her, becoming a quiet but powerful presence. At the events at one such meeting, a young mother stood up, her voice trembling, as she recounted an incident involving her teenage son. He had been stopped by police while walking home from basketball practice, accused of matching the description of a robbery suspect, though he was eventually let go. The experience had left him shaken and distrustful of authority. He's afraid to leave the house. Now, the woman said, tears streaming down her face. He used to love playing with his friends, but now he doesn't even want to go outside. Alicia approached her, placing a comforting hand on her. "Shoulder your story matters," she said, "and together we're going to make sure it's heard." These stories, collected from town halls, became a cornerstone of Alicia's advocacy. They provided a powerful narrative, illustrating the systemic issues that affected families across the city. Armed with these testimonies, Alicia began meeting with state legislators, pushing for laws that would strengthen oversight and protect vulnerable communities. Meanwhile, Tiana was finding her own way to contribute at school. She started a club dedicated to social justice, inviting classmates to discuss issues like racism and inequality. The club quickly gained popularity, drawing students from diverse backgrounds who wanted to make a difference. One afternoon, Tiana invited Alicia to speak at a club meeting. Alicia arrived to find a group of eager faces, their eyes filled with curiosity and determination. "Thank you for having me." Alicia began smiling at the students. "It means so much to see young people like you leading the way. Change starts with conversations like this." The students asked thoughtful questions, their enthusiasm infectious as Alicia answered. She couldn't help but feel hopeful. These kids represented the future, and they were already stepping up to shape it. By late summer, the movement had reached new heights. Alicia's advocacy had drawn the attention of national organizations, and she was invited to speak at a major conference on criminal justice reform. The event brought together activists, scholars, and policymakers from across the country, all united by a common goal. Standing on the stage in front of hundreds of attendees, Alicia took a moment to gather her thoughts. She thought of Tiana, of the stories she had heard at town halls, of the countless families who had suffered in silence. "When my Dada was handcuffed in a park, she began her voice steady. It felt like my world had been turned upside down. But what I've learned since then is that I'm not alone." So many families have stories like mine, stories of fear, of pain, of injustice. And yet we are still here, still fighting, still hoping. The audience erupted into applause, their support palpable. Alicia continued her words, carrying the weight of a movement. "This fight isn't just about changing policies or passing laws. It's about changing hearts and minds. It's about building a world where every child can grow up feeling safe, valued, and free." By the time she finished, the room was on its feet. The standing ovation, a testament to the impact of her words. As she stepped off the stage, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. Back home, Tiana greeted her mother with a hug. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly. Alicia smiled, her exhaustion replaced by pride. "It went well, baby. People are listening." Tiana nodded her face. "Thoughtful good, because we still have a lot of work to do." Alicia laughed, ruffling her daughter's hair. "That we do, but I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else by my side." Together, they sat down at the kitchen table, mapping out their next steps for Alicia and Tiana. The fight for justice had become more than a mission. It had become their life's work, and as daunting as the road ahead seemed, they knew they had the strength, the support, and the determination to see it through. The momentum of the movement showed no signs of slowing down with every story shared at town halls. Every social media post that went viral and every headline that focused on Tiana's case, Alicia saw the seeds of change beginning to take root. Yet for every step forward, there were challenges that tested her resolve. One such challenge arose when a prominent local news outlet published an op-ed criticizing the Civilian Review Board and the broader movement. Alicia had spearheaded the piece, titled "Accountability or Overreach," argued that the review board was an unnecessary intrusion on law enforcement, and claimed Alicia's activism was more about revenge than reform. Alicia read the article in her kitchen, her hands shaking with frustration. The words felt like a personal attack, dismissing her family's pain and trivializing the broader fight for justice. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but as she thought of Tiana and the countless others impacted by systemic failures, she knew she couldn't stay silent. Taking a deep breath, Alicia sat down at her laptop and began drafting a response. Her words were measured but firm, addressing each point raised in the article with clarity and conviction. "This is not about undermining law enforcement," she wrote. "It is about ensuring that those tasked with protecting us are held to the highest standards of integrity. Accountability is not a threat to public safety. It is the foundation of it." Alicia submitted her piece to the same outlet, and it was published the following week. The response was overwhelming, with readers flooding the comment section and social media with messages of support. "Thank you for speaking out." One comment read, "We need more voices like yours." As the public debate continued, Lisa and her team focused on solidifying the Civilian Review Board's authority. They worked closely with city officials to draft legislation that would grant the board the power to conduct independent investigations and enforce disciplinary actions. It was a daunting process, fraught with bureaucratic hurdles and fierce opposition from the police union. One evening, Alicia attended a closed-door meeting with key city councilman members and representatives from the police department. The atmosphere was tense, the room filled with sharp exchanges and pointed questions. Why should we give this board so much power? One council member asked, his tone skeptical. How do we ensure it doesn't become a tool for political vendettas? Alicia leaned forward, her voice steady but impassioned, because without accountability, there can be no trust. He said, and without trust, our community cannot thrive. This isn't about politics, it's about fairness, justice, and restoring faith in the system. Her words seemed to resonate, and by the end of the meeting, there was cautious agreement to move forward with the legislation. It was a small victory, but one that strengthened Alicia's resolve. Meanwhile, Tiana's school club was thriving. The students had organized their first event, a day of action focused on raising awareness about racial bias. They invited speakers, created interactive activities, and designed a mural that celebrated diversity and inclusion. On the day of the event, Alicia was invited to speak as she stood in front of the assembled students. She felt a swell of pride. You are the future. She said, her voice filled with emotion, and what you're doing here today matters. Never underestimate the power of your voices. Together, you can achieve incredible things. After her speech, Tiana led her mother to the mural. It depicted a vibrant scene of unity. With figures of all races and background standing hand in hand at the center was a depiction of Tiana herself, her face lit with determination. What do you think, Mama? Tiana asked, her eyes shining. Alicia blinked back tears. It's beautiful. She said, just like you. As the months went by, the movement gained national recognition. Alicia was invited to speak at conferences, collaborate with advocacy groups, and even testify before a congressional subcommittee on police reform. Each opportunity brought new challenges, but also new allies. One such ally was Senator Evelyn Grant, a longtime advocate for criminal justice reform. After hearing Alicia speak at a conference, the senator approached her with an idea. I want to introduce a federal bill to promote civilian oversight boards across the country. Senator Grant said, your work in Willow Creek has been inspiring, and I think we can use it as a model. Alicia was taken aback. That's incredible. She said, but I'm just one person. How can I help by sharing your story? Senator Grant replied, your voice has the power to move people together. We can make a real difference. The bill, dubbed the Community Accountability Act, faced an uphill battle in Congress, but it galvanized activists nationwide. Alicia became a central figure in the campaign, traveling to cities across the country to speak at rallies and meet with lawmakers. Each stop brought its own challenges, but also its own rewards. W's in Chicago, Alicia met a grandmother who had lost her grandson to police violence. In Atlanta, she joined a group of teenagers who were organizing their own protests in each city. She saw the same determination she had felt. The day Tiana was arrested, a determination to fight for a better future back in Willow Creek. Progress continued. The Civilian Review Board had begun its first investigations, and its members were already making an impact. One case involved a young man who had been wrongfully arrested during a traffic stop. The board's findings exonerated him, leading to a public apology from the police department. The young man's mother approached Alicia at a community event. Thank you, she said, tears streaming down her face. If it wasn't for you, my son would still be sitting in a jail cell. Alicia hugged her tightly. This is why we fight, she said so. No one has to go through what your family did. Despite the victories, there were still moments of doubt late at night, when the house was quiet and Tiana was asleep. Alicia would sit at her kitchen table, staring at the mountain of paperwork and unanswered emails. The weight of the responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming, but then she would think of Tiana, her courage, her resilience, her unwavering belief in their cause, and she would find the strength to keep going. One evening, as she was finishing a report for a local advocacy group, Tiana appeared in the doorway. Mama, you're still working? She asked, her voice heavy with sleep. Elisa smiled, just finishing up, sweetheart. Why are you up? I couldn't sleep, Tiana admitted, climbing into her mother's lap. Do you think we'll really change things? Alicia wrapped her arms around her daughter. I do, she said softly, because change isn't just something we hope for, it's something we make happen, and we're making it happen. Every single day, Tiana nodded, resting her head against her mother's chest. I want to help more. She said, I want to be like you. Alicia's heart swelled with pride. You already are, baby. She whispered, You already are, as they sat together in the quiet of the night. Alicia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, but she knew she wasn't walking it alone. Together. She and Tiana, and the countless others who had joined their fight, were building a legacy that would endure for generations. The progress Alicia and her allies made in Willow Creek was undeniable. Yet, with every step forward, new challenges arose to remind them that the fight for justice was far from over. Nationally, conversations about police accountability continued to polarize communities, and locally, opponents of the Civilian Review Board grew more vocal one morning. As Alicia was preparing for a community meeting, she received a call from Marcus. His voice was unusually tense. We got a problem. He said the police union is planning a counter rally downtown this weekend. They're calling for the dismantling of the review board. Alicia, sigh, her stomach tightening. Do we know how big it's going to be? Big enough to make noise. Marcus replied, but it's not just about their numbers. They're spreading misinformation, saying the board is unfairly targeting officers, that it's creating a hostile work environment. Alicia closed her eyes, steadying herself. All right, we need to get ahead of this. Let's organize a press conference to address their claims, and we'll need testimonies from people. The review board has helped, Marcus agreed, and they spent the rest of the day. Mobilizing their network by evening, Alicia had gathered a diverse group of community members to speak out in support of the board. Among them was a teacher who had been harassed by an officer during a traffic stop, a local business owner whose son had been wrongfully detained, and even a retired police captain who supported reform. The press conference took place 2 days before the union's rally, standing before a sea of microphones and cameras. Alicia spoke with her usual blend of passion and composure. This review board is not about punishing good officers. She began, it's about holding everyone to the same standard of accountability. The families here today are proof of why this work matters. They've experienced the harm that comes from a system without oversight. We cannot go backward. The testimonies that followed were heartfelt and powerful by the end of the event. The media coverage overwhelmingly favored the review board, countering much of the union's narrative. The weekend came, and with it the union's rally downtown Willow. Creek was a cacophony of clashing voices, protesters demanding the review, board's abolition on one side, and counter-protesters defending it on the other. Alicia chose not to attend, opting instead to focus on building long-term support for their initiatives. While the rally dominated the headlines for a few days, it ultimately fizzled. The union had underestimated the depth of public support for reform. Still, Alicia knew they couldn't afford to be complacent. As summer turned to fall, Alicia was invited to speak at a statewide conference on justice reform. The event brought together activists, educators, and lawmakers, providing a platform to share strategies and build alliances. On the second day of the conference, Alicia participated in a panel discussion alongside Senator Evelyn Grant, a renowned historian and the mayor of a neighboring city. The topic, how to sustain momentum in the fight for systemic change. I think the key is storytelling. Alicia said when it was her turn to speak, facts and figures are important, but what moves people, what makes them act, are the human stories. My daughter, Tiana's story opened eyes in our community. And now every family who shares their experience adds another layer to the picture. Together, those stories become undeniable. The audience responded with applause, and Alicia felt a surge of confidence. After the panel, several attendees approached her eager to collaborate on future projects. Among them was a filmmaker who expressed interest in creating a documentary about the movement in Willow Creek back home. Tiana's own activism continued to flourish. Her school club had grown to include dozens of members, and they had launched a campaign to educate their peers about implicit bias. The students created videos, posters, and workshops, some of which were so impactful that teachers began integrating them into their lessons. One afternoon, as Alicia picked Tiana up from school, her daughter excitedly shared the news. Miss Carter said our workshop is going to be part of next week's assembly. Isn't that cool? That's amazing, sweetheart, Alicia said, beaming. You should be proud of yourself. Tiana grinned. I just want people to understand. If we start teaching them when they're young, maybe things will get better. Alicia reached over to squeeze Tiana's hand. You're already making things better, she said. I'm so proud of you. The next major milestone came when the state legislature began. Considering a bill inspired by Willow Creek's Civilian Review Board, dubbed the Accountability in Policing Act, the bill proposed OSED, creating similar boards across the state with standardized powers and funding. Alicia was invited to testify in support of the bill alongside Marcia and several other advocates. The hearing was tense, with some lawmakers expressing skepticism about the feasibility of the proposal. One senator in particular challenged Alicia directly. Miss Daniels, he said, his tone clipped. You speak passionately about accountability, but how do you respond to concerns that these boards will discourage officers from doing their jobs effectively? Alicia met his gaze, her expression calm but resolute with respect. Senator, I don't believe accountability discourages anyone from doing their job. In fact, it encourages them to do it better. When officers know they're held to a high standard, it builds trust, trust from the community, trust from their colleagues. That trust is what makes their jobs easier, not harder. Her response earned nods from several lawmakers and murmurs of approval from the audience. By the end of the hearing, it was clear. The bill had gained significant support that evening. As Alicia and Tiana sat together in their living room, they reflected on how far they had come. Do you remember when this all started? Alicia asked, brushing a strand of hair from Tiana's face when it felt like the world was falling apart. Tiana nodded. I was so scared, Mama, but now I feel strong, like we did something important. Alicia smiled, pulling her daughter close. We did, and we're going to keep doing it for you, for me, for everyone. Tiana rested her head on her mother's, shoulder, her eyes filled with quiet determination. In that moment, Alicia knew that their journey, though challenging, had been worth every step. They had turned pain into purpose, and their fight for justice had become a beacon of hope for their community and beyond. The passage of the Accountability in Policing Act marked a pivotal moment in Alicia and Tiana's journey, though there was still much to be done. The achievement validated their efforts and galvanized their support across the state. Communities began forming their own civilian review boards, inspired by Willow Creek's model. Alicia's name became synonymous with grassroots activism and resilience. But as progress grew, so did resistance. One afternoon, as Alicia returned home from a meeting with advocacy groups, she found a stack of mail waiting on her kitchen counter. Among the usual bills and letters of support, one envelope stood out. It was unmarked with no return address. Alicia hesitated, a sense of unease washing over her. As she opened it, inside was a single sheet of paper with the words, "Stay in your lane." This fight isn't yours to win. Her stomach clenched. It wasn't the first time she had received a threatening message, but something about this one felt different, more personal. She immediately called Marcia, who listened with concern. "We need to report this," Mara said firmly. "These kinds of threats are meant to scare you into silence. We can't let them succeed." Alicia agreed, filing a report with the local authorities while the police took the matter seriously. Alicia knew the real battle wasn't just against the individuals sending threats. It was against a system that made such hostility possible. Tiana noticed her mother's tension that evening. Is everything okay, Mama? She asked, her brows furrowed with worry. Alicia forced a smile. Everything's fine, baby. Just a little hiccup. Nothing we can't handle. Tiana nodded, but didn't seem convinced. If someone's being mean, we can tell them they're wrong. Like we always do. Alicia pulled her daughter into a hug. That's right. She said softly, "We'll keep standing up for what's right together the next day." Alicia dove back into her work with renewed determination. She refused to let fear dictate her actions. The state-level success of the Accountability in Policing Act had inspired talks of a federal initiative, and AIA was determined to help shape the conversation. At the same time, Tiana continued to thrive in her own advocacy. Her school's social justice club had grown exponentially, and they were now collaborating with other schools to organize a citywide youth summit on equity and inclusion. The event, scheduled for the following month, quickly became a major focus for Tiana and her peers. We want to make it fun, but also meaningful. Tiana told Alicia one evening as they brainstormed ideas together, like maybe we can have workshops and speak speakers, but also art and music, something everyone can connect with that sounds wonderful. Alicia said, impressed by her daughter's vision. Do you have someone to help with the logistics? Yeah, Miss Carter said she'll help us with the space and stuff. And Marcus said he talked to some local artists about performing Elisis, smiled, proud of Tiana's leadership. You're doing something really special, sweetheart. I can't wait to see it. As the summit approached, Alicia found herself balancing her own advocacy with supporting Tiana's efforts. The Youth Summit quickly became a beacon of hope for the community, drawing attention from local media and even a few national outlets. On the day of the event, the city's main park was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity with tents, stages, and booths set up for workshops and performances. Alicia arrived early, helping Tiana and her friends set up decorations. The energy was infectious, with students running back and forth, finalizing details, and practicing their presentations by midday. The park was packed with attendees, from students and parents to teachers and local leaders. Tiana stood on the main stage, microphone in hand, as she welcomed the crowd. We're here today because we believe in a better future. She said, her voice, clear and confident, a future where everyone is treated with respect and kindness, no matter who they are. And we know that future starts with us. The audience erupted in applause, and Alicia felt a swell of pride watching her daughter shine throughout the day. She moved through the event, attending workshops, chatting with parents, and marveling at the creativity and passion on display. One booth featured an R in Asian, created by students from different schools. It depicted a tree with branches reaching toward the sky. Each branch covered in handprints, representing the diverse voices of the community. At the base of the tree was a plaque that read, "Our roots are strong. Our voices are stronger." Alicia ran her fingers over the plaque, overcome with emotion. The tree was a symbol of everything they had worked for: unity, resilience, IENTS, and the power of collective action. In the weeks following the summit, Alicia continued to receive invitations to speak and collaborate on national initiatives. One such invitation came from a well-known nonprofit organization that focused on criminal justice reform. They asked Alicia to join their leadership team as an advisor, offering her a platform to influence change on a larger scale. The offer was tempting, but it also meant stepping away from her work in Willow Creek, a decision Alicia didn't take lightly. She discussed it with Mara, Marcus, and other close allies, weighing the pros and cons. "You've built something incredible here," Mara said, "but your voice could make an even bigger impact on a national level. Whatever you decide will support you." Alicia also spoke with Tiana, who surprised her with unexpected insight. "I think you should do it. Mama Tiana said you've always said we should fight for what's right, no matter where it takes us. Maybe this is where you're supposed to go." Alicia smiled, marveling at her daughter's wisdom. "I'll think about it." She promised. After much reflection, Alicia decided to accept the role, while it was bittersweet to step back from her grassroots work. She knew the opportunity would allow her to amplify the movement's message and support communities across the country. Before leaving for her first trip as an advisor, Alicia organized a farewell event in Willow Creek. It wasn't a goodbye, she assured everyone, but a celebration of how far they had come together. The event took place at the same park where Tiana had been arrested, a deliberate choice to reclaim the space as a symbol of hope. Hundreds of residents attended, filling the park with music, laughter, and a shared sense of purpose. As the sun set, Alicia took the stage one last time, her voice carried across the crowd, filled with gratitude and determination. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's the beginning of a new chapter. What we've built here in Willow Creek is proof that change is possible, and I promise you, wherever this journey takes me, I will never stop fighting for us, for justice, for accountability, for a brighter future." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing into the night. Tiana joined her mother on stage, taking her hand as they stood together, a symbol of everything the movement had achieved in the months that followed. Allah's work as an advisor took her to cities across the country. She met with lawmakers, activists, and families, sharing her story and advocating for systemic reform. Her influence grew, and so did the impact of the movement back in Willow. Creek Tiana continued to lead her school's social justice club, organizing events and mentoring younger students. The seeds Alicia had planted in her community blossomed, nurtured by the collective efforts of those she had inspired. And though the road ahead remained challenging, Alicia and Tiana knew they were on the right path together. They had turned a moment of pain into a movement of hope, one that would endure for generations to come. As Alicia settled into her role as a national advisor for criminal justice reform, her life took on a new rhythm. She traveled frequently, visiting cities, grappling with similar challenges to those she had faced in Willow Creek in every community. She encountered people inspired by her story, people who were ready to stand up, speak out, and demand change. But Alicia never lost sight of her roots, no matter how busy her schedule became. She made time for Tiana and for the community that had launched her journey, weekly video calls with Willow. Creek's Civilian Review Board kept her connected to their progress, and she often sent resources and suggestions to help them navigate new challenges. One evening, Alicia sat in a hotel room in Washington, D.C., reviewing her note for a major conference on police accountability. She had been asked to deliver the keynote address, and the weight of the responsibility pressed on her. She wanted her words to resonate not just with the policymakers in attendance, but also with the families and communities watching from home. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a video call from Tiana. Alicia smiled instantly, feeling lighter, as her daughter's face appeared on the screen. "Hey, sweetheart, how was school?" Alicia asked. "It was good," Tiana replied, her excitement evident. "Guess what? We started planning another event for the club. It's going to be about how kids can stand up for each other, like if they see someone being treated unfairly, what they can do to help." "That's an amazing idea." Alicia said, her heart swelling with pride. "You're becoming quite the leader," Tiana grinned. "I learned from the best." As the call ended, Alicia felt a renewed sense of purpose. Everything she was doing, every late-night flight, every grueling meeting was for Tiana and kids like her the next morning. She walked onto the stage at the conference with confidence, her keynote address delivering a powerful call to action that earned a standing ovation back in Willow Sis Creek. The Civilian Review Board faced its first major challenge, a high-profile case involving an officer accused of excessive force. The incident had sparked protests with the community, demanding accountability and transparency. The board launched an investigation navigating the delicate balance between impartiality and public pressure. Alicia followed the developments closely, offering advice and encouragement from afar. She reminded the board members of the values that had guided their creation: fairness, integrity, and a commitment to justice when the board released its findings. Weeks later, their thorough and transparent process won widespread praise. The officer was held accountable, and the community's trust in the board deepened. Alicia received a flurry of messages from Willow Creek residents thanking her for helping create a system that worked. Meanwhile, Alicia's work on the national stage gained momentum. She was invited to testify before Congress once again, this time as part of a coalition advocating for a federal oversight system modeled after Willow Creek's Civilian Review Board. In her testimony, Alicia shared stories of families she had met across the country, stories that echoed her own experience with Tiana. Her voice, steady and impassioned, carried the weight of countless lives affected by injustice. "This is not just about reforming policies," she told the lawmakers. "It's about restoring humanity to a system that has too often forgotten it. We have the power to create a future where accountability and justice are not just ideals, but realities." Her words struck a chord while the path to federal legislation was slow and uncertain. Alicia's testimony became a rallying cry for advocates nationwide. At the same time, Tiana's Youth Summit inspired similar events in neighboring cities, creating a network of young leaders dedicated to equity and inclusion. Tiana herself began receiving invitations to speak at schools and conferences, her poise and passion capturing audiences of all ages. One day, as Alicia returned from a trip to California, Tiana greeted her with exciting news. "Mama, guess what? I've been invited to give a talk at the state capitol for Youth Leadership Day." "That's incredible," Alicia exclaimed, pulling her daughter into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." "I'm a little nervous," Tiana admitted, "but I want to do it." I want people to know that kids can make a difference too. You're going to be amazing. Alicia said, brushing a strand of hair from Tiana's face, just speak from your heart, and they'll listen. On the day of the event, Alicia watched from the audience as Tiana took the stage dressed in a simple blazer and jeans. Her daughter looked every bit the confident young leader. Alicia knew her to be good morning. Tiana began, her voice steady despite the size of the crowd. When I was 9 years old, I was arrested for something I didn't do. It was scary, and it made me feel small, but that moment taught me something important. Even when bad things happen, we have the power to stand up and fight for what's right. The audience hung on her every word as Tiana spoke about her journey, the lessons she had learned, and her vision for a better world. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause, and Alicia's heart swelled with pride. As the years passed, the movement Alicia had helped build continued to grow. The Accountability in Policing Act inspired similar legislation in other states, and discussions about civilian oversight became a central topic in national conversations about justice reform. Alicia's work as an advisor evolved, expanding to include mentorship programs for grassroots activists and partnerships with international organizations seeking to address systemic inequalities in their own countries. Through it all, she remained grounded, always drawing strength from her roots in Willow Creek. Tiana, too, blossomed into a formidable advocate. By the time she entered high school, she had already established herself as a leader, organizing statewide youth coalitions and mentoring younger students. Her experiences gave her a deep empathy and wisdom that bellied her age. One evening as a lead, IA and Tiana sat together on the porch of their home. They reflected on how far they had come. Do you remember that day in the park? Alicia asked, her voice tinged with emotion. Tiana nodded, her gaze thoughtful. I used to wish it never happened, she said, but now I think it made us stronger. Alicia smiled, wrapping an arm around her daughter. It did, and it showed us how much power we have when we stand up for what's right. Tiana rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Do you think things will keep getting better? I do, Alicia said firmly, because we're not alone. There are so many people out there fighting for the same things we are, and as long as we keep going, change will come in the quiet of the evening. Mother and daughter sat side by side, their bond unshakable, their resolve unwavering. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they also knew they had the strength and the community to see it through together. They had turned pain into purpose, creating a legacy of hope and justice that would endure for generations to come. The years that followed cemented Alicia and Tiana's legacy as changemakers. Their efforts had become more than just a story of personal resilience. They had transformed into a blueprint for communities seeking justice and accountability. But for Alicia, the work was never about recognition. It was about ensuring that no other family would have to experience the pain and injustice she and Tiana had endured. One crisp autumn morning, Alicia found herself back in Willow Creek, walking the familiar path to the park where everything had begun. The park had changed since that fateful day. The once cracked basketball courts had been repaired, new benches lined the walkways, and a mural celebrating community and diversity adorned the side of a nearby building. At the center of it all stood a plaque, newly installed, that read, "In honor of Tiana Daniels and all who fight for justice. May we always remember that change begins with courage." Alicia traced her fingers over the words, her heart swelling with emotion. She turned to find Tiana standing beside her, now taller and more confident, her face glowing with pride. They named it the Courage Corner, Tiana said, gesturing to the mural and the surrounding area. The kids from the summit helped design it. Alicia smiled, her voice thick with emotion. It's beautiful, just like the community we've built together. Later that afternoon, Alicia and Tiana attended a town hall meeting at the community center. The room was filled with familiar faces, friends, neighbors, and allies who had been with them since the beginning. The Civilian Review Board was presenting its annual report, highlighting the progress they had made and the challenges they still faced. As the meeting drew to a close, the board chair invited Alicia to say a few words. She stood, taking a moment to look out at the faces of the people who had become her extended family. When we started this journey, I didn't know where it would lead. She began, "All I knew was that I couldn't stay silent today. As I stand here with all of you, I'm reminded of the power of community. None of this would have been possible without your voices, your courage, and your belief in a better future." The room erupted into applause, but Alicia's eyes were fixed on Tiana, who was clapping the loudest of all. She felt a surge of hope, knowing that the next generation was ready to carry the torch as mother and daughter walked home. That evening, the cool breeze carrying the sounds of laughter and conversation from the streets, Alicia felt a deep sense of peace. They had come so far, and while there was still work to do, the foundation they had built was strong. Tiana looked up at her mother, her eyes bright with determination. "We did something amazing, didn't we?" Mama Alicia smiled, her heart full. "We did, baby, and we're not done yet together." They walked into the future, their bond unbreakable, their mission clear, to continue the fight for justice, for equality, and for a world where every child could grow up knowing their worth in the months that followed. The impact of Alicia and Tiana's journey continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined. Communities across the country adopted the Accountability and Policing Act as a framework for reform, and Willow Creek's Courage Corner became a gathering place for civic engagement and dialogue. But while progress was visible, Alicia knew that systemic change required persistence. As she and Tiana navigated the evolving landscape of their work, they remained focused on the values that had brought them. This far courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of community. One winter evening, Alicia received an invitation to attend a national award ceremony. Honoring leaders in social justice, the letter explained that she would be receiving the Justice and Humanity Award, a recognition of her tireless advocacy and the transformative impact of her work. When she shared the news with Tiana, her daughter's face lit up with excitement. "You deserve it." Mama Tiana said, hugging her tightly, "You've changed so many lives." "No, we've changed lives," Alicia corrected with a smile. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The ceremony took place in a grand hall in Washington, D.C., filled with luminaries from all walks of life. As Alicia took the stage to accept her award, she felt a wave of emotions, gratitude, humility, and a profound sense of purpose. "This award isn't just for me," she said, her voice steady as she addressed the audience. "It's for every family who has fought for justice, every child who has faced fear and risen above it, and every community that has come together to demand change. This work isn't about one person, it's about all of us. Together, we are building a better world." The audience rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the hall. Tiana, seated in the front row, beamed with pride, her mother's words resonating deeply. The following spring, Alicia and Tiana returned to Willow Creek to host a community event, marking the 5th anniversary of the Civilian Review Board's establishment. The park was alive with activity. Families picnicked on the grass, children played on the swings, and local musicians performed on a small stage. At the center of the festivities was a panel discussion featuring members of the review board, local activists, and a few young leaders mentored by Tiana's Social Justice Club. Alicia watched with pride as Tiana spoke about the importance of youth involvement in shaping the future. "We're not just the next generation," Tiana said, "we're the now generation, and if we want change, we have to start making it happen." Today, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alicia and Tiana stood together near the mural at Courage Corner, reflecting on how far they had come. The tree's hand-painted branches had grown over the years, with new handprints added by each generation of young leaders. Tiana reached out to touch the mural, her voice filled with wonder. "Do you think one day kids will look at this and know what it meant?" "I think they'll feel it," Alicia replied. Her gaze softening, "They'll see that every handprint tells a story of people who believed they could make a difference." Tiana nodded, a thoughtful smile on her face, and we'll keep adding to it as mother and daughter walked home under the evening sky. Their footsteps echoed with purpose. The road ahead was still long, but they embraced it with open hearts. Knowing that every step they took was part of a larger journey together, they had turned tragedy into triumph, fear into strength, and pain into progress. Their legacy was more than the changes they had achieved. It was the hope they had ignited in others, and as they looked toward the future, They knew one truth would always guide them. Change begins with courage and courage lies in all of us.